Welcome everyone to part 1 of this introduction to Unity, where I'll be walking you through making the classic snake. So here we're going to make a new project from Unity Hub. We're going to build a 2D project. We're going to name it, whatever you feel like naming it. Make sure you put it in the location you want to put it in, and your cloud organization. I didn't want to connect this to the cloud, so I just unclicked this here. And then you click Create Project. It'll take a minute, but I will save you the trouble of watching all this. So here we have our blank canvas. I always like to start out with making new folders. I always start with the scripts, images, sounds. Usually I include prefabs, but I forget on this one and I add it in later. Also, as a note, tailor this to your own project. If you know you're going to have a bunch of files for very specific things, set up a folder for it here. Save yourself some organization and time down the road, especially when you are working with multiple people on the team. So here we have our camera view. Over here on the left we have our hierarchy. I click on a couple things here, but what I want to do is click in the game object, create a 2D object. We're going to make ourselves a little square here. Oh, triangle. I turn it into a square later. First off, we're going to make the head of the snake. I run most of the snake's code through the head. Plan your project according to its needs. I knew that the first thing I wanted to do was get a snake. Well, the snake head moving around the screen. Then add the components behind it. Have it move around the screen. And then when it comes in contact with itself, self-destruct, because that's how Snake goes. Always try to break your projects down into bite-sized chunks. It just helps. And also, one of the things I learned after this was it's very important to be goal-oriented. Have a plan. Don't just jump into coding. There are plenty of things I would change about this specific example, but I'm going back and recreating the code as a example to post and share. I probably would have used a grid system instead of letting the snake be free-floating. So here I'm adding a new script. I'm going to call it Snake Script. I'm going to move it into my scripts folder. One of the nice things is when you make a script from the components, or from the add components, you don't have to add it in. You'll see later I have some build issues, and it's because I forgot to connect the public pieces that Unity allows you to connect. I don't think we're doing anything here with the start, but the update updates every frame. So make sure what you put there is supposed to be happening every frame. I really bogged down one of my games I was making because I was running everything on every frame. And a lot of stuff doesn't have to happen every frame. So our goal first is to check for direction input and then move the snake every frame from the stored direction we have. quick actions, generate a function. Another thing I'm thinking about is, when do I not want to do this? So I don't want to be moving the snake when it's dead, or when we pause the game. Which, you want to be able to pause your game. Not like the old days when you weren't allowed to pause. Another important thing that I learned after making the code for this video is, don't let other objects change the variables in your current object. Make a public function for them to call, and that way you can trace it better. Because if all of a sudden your snake's dead, and not for any reason you know of, you gotta go through all your code and figure out which script. You could have hundreds of scripts, and you gotta figure out which one is changing the variable. Where if you have the function, you can see what references there are. You got the little highlight right there. One reference. And it'll go up as you reference that function. I do put a couple good functions down at the bottom where I did that. So here I want to be able to catch input from WASD and the up, down, left, and right arrows. So each frame it's going to check to see if there has been input on these. And if it has, it's going to change the direction. Later on, I want to change it so that it'll store a turn. So you don't want to be able to turn in on that first segment of your snake. So it's nice to be able to turn and keep it next to the snake, but not in it. So later on I change it to storing a direction until it's moved past that first segment. Just putting a comment at the top saying, these are the integers to reference up, down, left, or right. Now, up, right, down, left, because a lot of programming does that. Been working a lot with HTML lately, so that was on my brain. To keep code from running multiple if, else, if, else, if else, if statements, I put a return there so that it just stops that function as soon as it needs to be stopped. Remember when you're copying and pasting to be very careful. I think I got everything here that I needed to. But a lot of bugs get introduced from copying and pasting. So here, I've gone back up to the move snake method. we want to both turn the snake the proper direction and move it at speed. Working in Unity, it's nice to make a little public variable that you can access in the editor as you are debugging. You can change the values. Just always remember that when you change a value while you're actually playing the game, you need to remember the value, stop playing the game, put in the new value or copied value, because it doesn't keep from during debugging to out of debugging. Here I'm going to be adding the rotational variable. There's a few different ways to do this, but I just decided on this one. Another coding life lesson is there's probably always a better way to do it. So if you want to take the time to sit down and figure it out, a lot of times that's a good plan. So here I'm just setting this variable to my current rotational value. Based on the direction I want to rotate and move. So, to move your object, you're going to use transform position. You could change the variable directly by changing the X on your transform position, or you can use this vector up, which I'm doing here. You got vector up, right, down, left. I'm using a move speed so that I can change it easier. And then times delta time means that it's going to stay constant depending on your frame rate. So if your frame rate goes up, delta time's smaller. If your frame rate goes down, delta time's bigger. It's just the change between frames. And then here I'm making sure my rotation is checking to make sure it's set to the correct direction. And since I'm rotating on the Z-axis, I'm going to keep X and Y and then just rotate Z. Then I think here I'm going to cut and save you guys the trouble of watching me do that 4 times. So as you can see here, I've got 0, 270, 180, and 90. That's just around the clock, but it's the opposite way of the way I went with my up, right, down, left. So here you can see, I get in here, I've got my snake turning, but it's not going anywhere. And then I remember that, oh yeah, I've got the public variable that I can use in the editor. Just pause it up there. I get lost a little bit here for a second, but you click on your object, and then in your script section, you can change the variable right there. And you can mess around with it. One of the key things, though, is that once you're done testing your number, make sure to remember what it is. And when you stop this play right here, you want to make sure you put it in here. Save, run, and it should be working correctly again. I think I'll be stopping the video here soon, just because I want to keep these tutorials a little shorter. I have a little snake head. Keep it simple. If you're not the artist, then what you put is going to get deleted anyways, so just have something simple that tells you, what direction you're doing and what part of the object it is. So there I have my little simple head, and here's our code for the head moving around. That's a good breaking point because you want to get to this point, test that it's working correctly, and then build off of it. Alright, hope you've all been having a great day. Come back next time as we add the function that delays our turn and how we're going to handle generating the rest of the snake.